Alright, welcome back to the Bjorn Theory. I am Ethan Pariso, as I said in the previous video and in the introductory video. And it has been requested that I talk about diabetes. I'm going to talk a bit about them. And there is so much information out there on diabetes and different types of diabetes that, of course, I can't go over everything. I'm going to go over some of the basics. So I'm going to give you an introduction to diabetes. Now, there are two main types of diabetes. There's diabetes mellitus type 1 and diabetes mellitus type 2. Type 1 is basically when your body doesn't produce the insulin that is needed to get the sugar out of your blood, or the glucose. And diabetes mellitus type 2 is basically where your body doesn't accept the insulin that your body produces. So the pancreas, of course, produces the insulin. Insulin is a hormone. So insulin binds to the glucose in your blood and transports it into the cells to be used for energy. In a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic, their body, those receptors on the cells, don't accept insulin as well. We'll start with the type 1, where they don't produce enough insulin. Now, with type 1 diabetics, usually you're born with it, and they may find it as a young child. The family physician will work with you to get it under control. They may refer you to an endocrinologist to handle the diabetes, or at least initially to get it under control. Now, diabetes is typically what it is your blood sugar goes too high. And when your blood sugar goes too high, it gets thicker. Your blood gets thicker. So if you think of like honey, molasses, things like that, really high in sugar content and all, it's really thick. Well, your blood doesn't get that thick. If it did, then you would die. With diabetes type 1, you will be taking insulin shots, or you may even have an insulin pump, depending on the severity of your diabetes. Now, the insulin shots, there are many different types of insulins that are fast-acting and long-acting and things like that, whether it's Humalog or Humulin, or Lantus is a longer-acting one. Novolog 7030 is another longer-acting one. So those are different ones that you may have to actually give yourself injections for, or have someone else give you injections to help keep your blood sugar under control. And you'll be checking your blood sugar depending on the severity of your diabetes. It could be several times a day, or it could be twice a day, or once or twice a week. It really depends. With a type 1 diabetic, you're usually checking it a couple times a day before meals, and you'll adjust your dosage depending on how many calories and carbs and all this other stuff that you're taking in. That's a little bit more in depth than we're going to go here. So with the type 2 diabetic, typically their body doesn't take in the insulin that their body produces, rather than the type 1 that doesn't produce enough insulin. Now the type 2, they can be on oral medications like glyburide, metformin, or glucotrol, or some of these other things. With a type 2 diabetic, you'll be on some oral medications, typically. Sometimes it can be diet control, because type 2 diabetes is typically going to be because of weight or something in your metabolism, something like that. So they usually say if you lose some weight, you eat right, you won't have to be on medication for it. But for some people that doesn't work, it's not enough. So they have to take oral medications, and then after a while, sometimes those people even have to go on oral medications and insulin injections. Not everybody has to do this. There is another type, another situation that you can become diabetic. One of them is gestational diabetes. Or for women, when they're pregnant, if their glucose or their blood sugar levels go up while they're pregnant, they have to get blood tests to check for this, if they have certain signs and symptoms. Some signs and symptoms of high blood sugar, could be for anyone, is what they call polydipsia. You're drinking a lot. Polyuria, where you're going to the bathroom a lot and urinating a lot. Polyphagia, when you're eating a lot and you're just feeling hungry and you keep eating and eating more. Fruity breath, things like that. That can also be a sign of extremely high blood sugar, which is called DKA, or diabetic ketoacidosis. Now, I know I kind of jump and run from one thing to another, but I go with the flow of my thoughts. So, diabetic ketoacidosis, when your blood sugar is really high, it can be like 600 or above. I've seen them up to 1,000, 1,500, really dangerous. But when you're in that state, you could be in a coma or you could die from it. Not everybody. It depends on what your blood sugar normally runs and what your body is used to. But with the DKA, you'll be admitted to the hospital most of the time, and they may put you on an insulin drip. So a constant amount of insulin is going into your bloodstream, and they're checking your blood sugar every hour, pricking your finger and checking to see what the levels are, and they have to adjust using a formula on the dosage and how fast to run it. So the diabetic ketoacidosis, what they look for is they do blood tests and they check for certain levels there. They can do a urine test and they'll check to see if there is glucose in the urine, which means there's so much glucose in the blood that is spilling out through the kidneys and into the urine. And they can look for ketones in that urine. Ketones, it's a byproduct of fat metabolism. So your body usually uses this glucose that the insulin will take into the cell. It'll use that for energy. If your body isn't taking that glucose into the cells and using it, the glucose, it builds up in your blood. And so when it builds up in your blood, it's not getting into the cells being used as energy. The cells still need energy, so they go to the fat cells and start breaking the fat cells down to get the energy. And that's where the byproduct of ketones comes in. So that goes into the blood, it goes in to the urine, and they can see there's ketones in your DKA. Now, if it should go even farther and your fat stores are depleted, then it will go to muscle. So the order goes glucose to fat cells to muscle. Muscle is basically when you're starving. When your body is starving for energy, it'll start breaking that muscle down. Not good at all. What else do you want to know about diabetes? There are all kinds of things. There are a lot of information about diets, about different insulin regimens, oral medications, lifestyles, changes that you'll need to make if you find out that you are diabetic. Wounds are a big issue with diabetics, especially if your glucose is not tightly controlled. You can develop ulcers on your feet, or if you're not able to move around very much, if you have some kind of physical disability and you can't change positions a lot, your skin can break down a little bit more. It'll be harder to heal. You'll be more likely to get an infection. And we think of diabetics and infections, they get them really easily because you ever see a piece of candy on the sidewalk and ants are just all around it, anything sugary, whether it's soda, candy, whatever, chocolate, something like that. Same kind of idea. Bacteria really grows well in warm, moist environments, and with glucose, that just makes it even worse. If you have any kind of cut, like if you cut your foot on a nail or get a splinter, or just hit it on something and get a scrape on it, it can get really bad. It can turn gangrenous. You can get osteomyelitis, which is basically an infection in the bone itself. And at that point, they'll have to do amputations. I've seen so many diabetics have to get amputations. They start with amputating a part of the toe or a whole toe, part of the foot. They'll move up to the lower leg. They may cut off below the knee, above the knee, and it'll end up taking your life if you don't keep it under control. So, very important to keep an eye on your feet, your skin, make sure you're keeping them clean, make sure you're keeping an eye on your blood sugar. It sounds like a lot, and it really is, and there's a lot more to it than that, but you learn it over a period of time. Now, if you just have a family member that is diabetic or a friend that's a diabetic, you can go to all kinds of websites and find out, and I'll put some information. I'm sure I'll check the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, as well as National Institutes of Health. I'll check both of those sites. Those are ones that I used in my previous video to get some of that information. Well, referenced it to those sites. And I'll put those links down below in the doobly-doo of this video. If you have any other questions about it specifically, diabetes and things like that, then I can try to answer those for you and also find other resources where you can do more reading on that. That's it for now, and suggest more topics in the comments below, whether it's medical related or not. I would like to do really anything and everything. So just let me know, and I will see you next time.